She walked into that restaurant every day, smiling and serving others as if it were just another day at work. But that night, something inside her turned cold. When a black man sat at her table, she didn't see a customer. She saw someone she thought didn't belong. What she didn't know was that the man she humiliated owned everything around her. What happens when power, prejudice, and pride collide? And the truth comes out? The night sky over Atlanta glowed with the soft orange haze of city lights. Inside a quiet office above a bustling restaurant, Marcus Ellison stared at the glowing sign outside his window, Elliot's Kitchen. His name wasn't on it, not exactly. It was a name he'd chosen years ago to sound neutral, something that wouldn't scare away investors or guests. But everything beneath that sign, every brick, every table, every recipe, was his. Marcus had started with nothing but a dream and two hands that never stopped working. For years, he'd cooked in kitchens where no one bothered to learn his name, where he'd been boy or kid or the line cook. He'd cleaned tables, washed dishes, and built menus in restaurants that would never let him dine in peace. But he never complained. He observed. He learned, and slowly he built something of his own. By 42, Marcus was the silent owner of 3 restaurants, 2 thriving, 1 struggling. Elliot's Kitchen was his favorite, the place he'd poured his heart into. It was supposed to be the one where people came for more than food, for warmth, respect, belonging. But as he watched the dining room camera feed flicker on his office screen, something bothered him. He saw smiles, laughter, service with charm. But beneath that, he sensed something else, a thin layer of judgment, the kind that hides behind polite tones and fake smiles. Marcus knew it well. It was the same tone he'd grown up hearing in every "you're so well-spoken" and "you don't sound like you're from here." He leaned back in his chair, eyes tired but focused. Maybe, he thought, it's time I stopped being invisible. Friday nights at Elliot's Kitchen were chaos wrapped in candlelight. The air smelled of roasted garlic, butter, and ambition. Servers moved like dancers, each step practiced, each smile rehearsed. Among them was Rebecca, a waitress with 5 years of experience and a sharp tongue she used like a blade. Rebecca wasn't cruel by nature, just tired. Life had hardened her edges, late bills, long shifts, and the quiet bitterness of watching others move ahead. But lately, something darker had taken root. She'd started noticing who got served first, who got extra smiles, and who didn't. And she had her own silent rules about the kind of people who fit into this restaurant's image. That night she arrived early, hair tied perfectly, uniform pressed, her name tag shining like a badge. The manager, unaware of Marcus's quiet presence upstairs, handed her the best section, the one that always got the biggest tips. "Full house tonight," he said. "Big crowd." "Let's keep it classy," Rebecca smirked. "Always do." From his office, Marcus watched the floor cameras again, listening to the chatter, the laughter, the sound of silverware tapping on plates. It was everything he'd worked for. Yet something inside him whispered, "You still don't belong here." He decided, on impulse, to do something he hadn't done in months. Dine downstairs unannounced like any other guest. Marcus changed out of his blazer and into a plain shirt and jeans. He wanted to blend in, not as the owner, but as a customer. No entourage, no introductions, just him. He took the back elevator down, walked through the side entrance, and stepped into the glow of his own restaurant. The host at the podium barely looked up. "Good evening, sir." "Table for one?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, please." She scanned the room. "You can sit at the bar," he smiled gently. "If possible, I'd prefer a table," she hesitated. "We're pretty full tonight." Her tone was polite but distant, the distant that carried a quiet assumption. Then Rebecca appeared. "It's fine," she said, flashing her customer-ready grin. "I'll take him." Marcus followed her to a small table near the corner, not the worst, but far from the best. She handed him a menu with one hand, already glancing over his shoulder at another group walking in. He noticed the shift instantly, her smile gone, her tone colder. He'd seen it before, too many times. Rebecca tapped her notepad. "Can I start you off with some water or—" Water's fine, Marcus said softly. Right. She walked away quickly. As he sat there, Marcus felt the old ache he thought he'd buried years ago, the quiet humiliation of being judged before saying a word. He looked around the room filled with people laughing and clinking glasses, and for a moment it didn't feel like his restaurant anymore. It felt like every place that once told him he didn't belong. Rebecca returned a few minutes later, placing the glass of water on the table harder than necessary. It splashed slightly. She didn't apologize. You ready to order? She asked, eyes darting around. I think so, Marcus said, scanning the menu. The salmon special looks good. Her tone tightened. That one's pricey. We have a great burger, too. Marcus looked up. I'll stick with the salmon. She shrugged, jotting it down quickly. Suit yourself. When she walked away, a couple at the following table exchanged glances. They'd noticed her tone, too. Subtle, dismissive, but sharp enough to cut. Marcus sat still, his mind spinning with memories of similar moments, in schools, stores, meetings. He remembered the sting of being followed through a department store, the forced smiles in boardrooms where he was the only one. And now, in the restaurant he'd built, he was reliving it all again. From behind the bar, the head bartender, Luis, caught Marcus's eye. He didn't recognize him as the owner. He'd only met Marcus once, months ago. But something in his gut told him this man wasn't just another diner. The quiet patience, the way he looked around, observing. It felt like someone watching their own creation. Meanwhile, Rebecca leaned on the service counter, whispering to another server. Table 12, guy's acting like he owns the place. Let's see if he tips that salmon money. They chuckled. But Marcus wasn't angry, not yet. He was disappointed, and more than that, curious. He wanted to see how far her prejudice would go when she thought no one was watching. By the time the meal arrived, Marcus had made up his mind. He wouldn't reveal himself tonight, not yet. He wanted to see the truth, raw and unfiltered. Rebecca set down his plate with barely a glance. No, enjoy your meal, no warmth. The difference in treatment was unmistakable. Across the room, another server greeted a table of smiling guests with charm and attention. The contrast was painful and powerful. Marcus took a slow bite of the salmon. It was perfect, seasoned exactly how he'd designed it years ago. And yet it tasted like ash in his mouth. His phone buzzed. A message from the manager. Everything looks smooth on the floor tonight, sir. Should I check in before closing? Marcus typed back one line, not yet. Let things run as they are. He watched Rebecca move from table to table, her smile reappearing for others, fading again when she returned to him. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel small in a space they deserved to stand tall. As the night wore on, the air thickened with a quiet tension only Marcus could sense. Something was building. Something he knew would break before the night was over. He leaned back, eyes steady, expression unreadable. Let's see, he whispered to himself, how deep this goes. And somewhere between the candlelight and the sound of clinking glasses, the line between silence and justice began to blur. The restaurant was at its peak hour, tables full, music low, lights golden. Laughter floated across the air like champagne bubbles. But Marcus felt none of it. From his quiet corner, he watched Rebecca glide between tables with the kind of charm that wins tips and approval. Her smile was wide, bright, until she turned toward him. Then it dimmed just slightly like a lamp turned low. She passed his table again, pretending not to see his empty glass. His water had long since gone warm, but she didn't refill it. Instead, she stopped at a nearby table where a group of young professionals were finishing dessert. Everything perfect, guys? She asked, her voice light and warm. One of the women laughed. As always, Rebecca. You're the best. Aw, stop it, she said, feigning modesty. You know we try to take care of our regulars. Marcus stared at his plate, his appetite fading. Every tone, every gesture, it all told a story. One he'd lived before. He had once believed that success could protect him from this, that wealth, ownership, and respect could act as armor. But prejudice doesn't care about titles. It only sees skin. The bar lights reflected faintly in his glass. His reflection looked tired, but not weak. Tired from remembering, not from feeling. When Rebecca finally returned, she didn't apologize for the delay. "You done with that?" she asked, already reaching for the plate. "I am," Marcus said evenly. "But I'd like to see the dessert menu, please." Her brows rose almost involuntarily. "The dessert menu?" "Yes." She forced a small laugh. "Sure, I'll get that for you." Her tone said something else entirely. "Why would you order dessert?" Marcus leaned back as she walked away. He'd dealt with words sharper than knives, but it was always the tone that hurt most. At a nearby table, a couple watched the exchange. The woman frowned. "That waitress, she's treating him differently." Her partner nodded, uneasy. "Yeah, I noticed too." They didn't intervene, not yet. But that seed of awareness had been planted, and soon it would grow into something bigger than either of them could predict. At the service station, Rebecca rolled her eyes at a coworker, Tracy, another waitress. "Guy at 12's giving me attitude," she said. "Thinks he owns the place or something." Tracy smirked. "The one in the corner? He looks harmless." "Harmless, sure, but entitled. You can tell." The two chuckled. Behind them, Luis, the bartender, overheard. He wiped a glass more slowly than usual. "Something about this conversation didn't sit right with me," Rebecca continued, lowering her voice. "You know what it is. These types always push boundaries. Come in dressed casually, expect special treatment. It's not that kind of restaurant." Tracy shrugged. "You're the one who said you wanted that section." "Yeah," Rebecca muttered, glancing toward Marcus's table. "Not that table." Luis looked up from the bar, eyes narrowing. He'd worked with Marcus long enough, even if he didn't recognize him on sight, to know the kind of standards the owner held. And this wasn't it. He reached for the house phone and called the office. "Hey, Mr. Ellison," he whispered. "It's Luis at the bar. Everything okay down there? You good?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Everything's fine, Luis. Let it play out." There was a pause. "You sure? That server—" "I know," Marcus said. "Just observe." Luis hung up reluctantly, still watching the floor. Across the room, the couple who'd noticed earlier exchanged looks again. The woman whispered, "She's ignoring him again. Look, she just walked past." "Maybe we should say something," the man murmured. She hesitated. "Maybe, but what if it makes things worse?" Marcus noticed their discomfort. He'd seen this too. The paralysis of good people, unsure when to act. It wasn't their fault. Society had trained everyone to look the other way. He took another sip of warm water and sighed quietly. Upstairs, the restaurant's night manager, Stephen, checked the live floor feed from his office. The hidden cameras showed everything. He frowned. "Is that him?" He zoomed in slightly. The view confirmed it. Marcus Ellison, the owner, sitting in the corner, alone. Stephen felt a chill crawl up his spine. He knew what this meant and how dire the consequences could be if mishandled. He stood up quickly, grabbing his jacket. Time to fix this before it explodes. But by the time he reached the dining room, things had already started to unravel. Rebecca returned to Marcus's table holding the dessert menu, but her voice carried an edge. "Here you go," she said, dropping it on the table. Marcus smiled politely. "Thank you." He scanned the list, then looked up. "I'll have the chocolate lava cake, please. And an espresso." "Right," she said, hesitating. "So that you know that one takes a while." "Kitchen's busy." "That's fine." She scribbled something on her pad and turned away, only to bump into Stephen, the manager. "Rebecca," he said softly. "Can I talk to you for a second?" She blinked. "Sure." They stepped aside near the bar. "Do you know who that man is at table 12? He asked quietly. She frowned. "A customer?" Stephen's jaw tightened. "That's Mr. Ellison." "The what?" "The owner." Her face froze. For a moment, the color drained from her cheeks. "No way, that's not—" "Yes way," Stephen said. "And he's been sitting there watching how you treat him." Rebecca's stomach twisted. I didn't mean—" Stephen cut her off. "You've been short with him all night. You ignored him, made comments, and you're lucky none of the guests recorded it." Her heart pounded. "I didn't say anything racist." You didn't have to, he replied. Sometimes it's not the words, it's the attitude. He glanced around nervously. Now listen carefully. You're going to fix this, professionally, gracefully, and immediately. Understood, she nodded, barely breathing. When she returned to Marcus's table, her smile was trembling. Sir, she said softly, I just wanted to apologize if I seemed off earlier. It's been a busy night, Marcus studied her face. Busy, yes, but not too busy for everyone else. Her lips parted. He held up a hand. Don't explain. Bring the dessert, please. She nodded quickly and hurried away. Marcus watched her go, his heart heavy. He'd seen remorse before, the kind born not from understanding but from exposure. Luis met his eyes across the room and Marcus gave a slight nod. Not yet. This wasn't about punishing one waitress. It was about revealing something more profound, the quiet rot that hides behind smiles and uniforms. As the dessert arrived, the couple nearby whispered again. She's shaking, the woman said. Maybe she knows, the man replied. Marcus took a slow sip of his espresso. The bitterness burned slightly, sharp, cleansing. He looked around the restaurant one last time, feeling the weight of years pressing down on him. The storm hadn't broken yet, but the first cracks were showing. When Rebecca returned to check on him, her voice was softer now. Everything okay, sir? Marcus nodded. Everything's fine. In fact, he set his fork down. Would you mind asking the manager to come over? Her stomach dropped again. Of course. Stephen appeared moments later, trying to look composed. Mr. Ellison, sir, I didn't realize you were joining us tonight. Marcus's expression was calm. That's the point, Stephen. I wanted to see what this place feels like when no one knows I'm the owner. Stephen swallowed hard. Understood, sir. Rebecca lingered nearby, pale. Marcus gestured to her. She's been instructive. Rebecca flinched. Sir, I truly didn't mean... Marcus looked at her, eyes steady. You didn't need to. That's what makes it worse. The room was starting to get crowded. Conversations quieted. The couple from earlier watched openly now. Marcus continued, voice low but clear enough to carry. This restaurant was built on respect, on the belief that every person deserves dignity, whether they're in a suit, a uniform, or jeans. Yet somehow that message got lost. Stephen nodded quickly. We'll address this immediately, sir. I know you will, Marcus said. But not because I'm asking, because it's the right thing to do. Then he stood, his chair sliding back softly. The silence around him was heavy. He looked at Rebecca one last time. Tonight you served me like a stranger in my own home. Remember that feeling, because for too many people, that's everyday life. He walked toward the exit slowly, each step deliberate. No shouting, no anger, just truth. When he reached the door, he turned back. Fix it from the ground up. Then he left. The room remained frozen for a long moment. Then the whispers began. Did you hear that? The owner? She treated him like unbelievable. Rebecca sank into a chair, trembling. Luis poured her a glass of water, silently yet firmly. Outside, Marcus stood beneath the restaurant sign, the golden letters glowing softly, Elliot's Kitchen. He exhaled, not in relief, but in resignation. The night wasn't over. It was only the beginning. By morning, the whispers had turned into noise. One of the guests, the woman from the nearby table, had posted a short video clip on social media. It didn't show much, just Marcus's calm voice saying, "You served me like a stranger in my own home." But that one sentence lit a fire. Within hours, the clip was shared thousands of times. Comments flooded in. Outrage, empathy, disbelief. Elliot's Kitchen began trending. Inside the restaurant, Stephen held an emergency staff meeting. Everyone looked tense. Listen, he said. What happened last night can't happen again. We represent something bigger than food. We represent respect. Rebecca sat silent, eyes red. She'd barely slept. The shame weighed heavily, but deeper than shame was a realization. How easily she had become the thing she thought she wasn't. Louis spoke up quietly. Mr. Ellison built this place so everyone felt seen. We forgot that somewhere. Marcus, unseen, stood at the doorway, listening. He stepped forward slowly. The staff turned toward him. "I don't want apologies," he said softly. "I want change. Real change." His eyes scanned the room. "This isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever been judged, dismissed, or made to feel less than human. It happens in places like this every day, and quiet, polite, invisible. And we call it just business. But it's not. It's cruelty with manners." The room was silent. Rebecca stood, voice trembling. "Sir, I can't undo what I did. But I want to learn. I want to be better." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then start there. That's where change begins." Later that day, the restaurant reopened. Customers returned, curious and cautious. And this time, the smiles felt different. Not rehearsed, not fake, honest. Marcus watched from his corner again, in the same seat as before. The light through the window fell across his face, warm and clean. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because someone had finally seen the truth for what it was. And as he looked around, the quiet hum of Elliot's kitchen carried a new sound. Not just the conversation or clinking of glasses, but the awareness, fragile yet authentic. The storm had passed, but the message would echo far beyond those walls. Part 1, the boiling point. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation, silverware clinking, and the faint hum of soft jazz. Yet at one corner table the air was thick, taut with tension. Marcus sat still, his hands folded neatly on the tablecloth. Across from him, Rebecca's forced smile twitched as she placed the bill beside his untouched dessert. Her voice was polite on the surface, but brittle underneath. "Whenever you're ready," she said, each word soaked in impatience. Marcus looked up, his calm gaze steady. "You're rushing me." "Again," he said softly. Her eyes hardened. "I'm just doing my job." He studied her for a long moment. The people at nearby tables were watching now, pretending not to. The tension had become a performance, the kind of spectacle polite society pretends not to see but never looks away from. "Are you?" Marcus asked quietly. "Or are you doing something else?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't answer. The manager, Todd, was already walking over. His fake concern was obvious. "Is there a problem here?" Rebecca gestured toward Marcus. "He's making me uncomfortable." The room froze. A single sentence, just enough poison to turn eyes into judgment and silence into condemnation. Marcus leaned back. "Uncomfortable," he repeated. "Because I asked to be treated like everyone else?" Todd's expression stiffened. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." There it was, that line, the one meant to silence, to shift guilt onto the wrong shoulders. The weight of years, of history, pressed against Marcus's chest, but his face remained unreadable. A couple at the following table whispered. Someone else pulled out their phone, recording quietly behind a menu. The whisper of judgment spread faster than smoke. Rebecca stepped back, arms crossed. "He raised his voice," she lied. Marcus hadn't. He hadn't even blinked. But that didn't matter now. The truth rarely wins in the first few seconds. It gets drowned out by perception. Todd moved closer. "Sir, if you can't behave, I'll have to ask you to leave." Marcus exhaled slowly. The words burned like acid, but he said nothing. Another waiter appeared, hovering uncertainly. The room had shifted from warmth to cold scrutiny. Every eye carried a verdict. Marcus finally rose to his feet, his chair scraping softly against the marble floor. "I came here to eat," he said, his tone even. "To enjoy a meal in peace. And yet here I am, put on trial for existing." Someone in the back muttered, "Come on, man, just go." It wasn't hatred that hurt the most. It was apathy, the quiet approval of those who didn't want trouble, the silence of the comfortable. Rebecca's lips curled slightly. She thought she'd won. Todd pulled out his phone. "I'm calling security." That did it. The air snapped. Marcus's hand trembled, not with fear, but with a lifetime of restraint finally reaching its limit. He looked Todd in the eye. "You're calling security on your boss?" Todd blinked. Confusion flickered. "What did you say?" Marcus reached into his blazer and pulled out a sleek black folder. Inside, documents, ownership papers, and the official seal of the company that ran the restaurant chain. He laid it on the table, calm as ever. "You've been working for me for 3 years, Todd. Maybe you should have recognized the name." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted higher, now recording every word. Rebecca stepped back, her face draining of color. You own this place?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, and I built it on a promise that no one would ever feel small here, that no one would be made to feel like less than human." He looked around, voice rising, not in anger but in clarity. "And yet, here we are." Todd stammered. "Sir, I didn't know." Marcus raised a hand. "That's the problem, Todd. You never wanted to know. You saw what you wanted to see." Rebecca's lip quivered. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" He turned toward her. "You meant every word, because you thought there'd be no consequence. You thought people like me don't belong here." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't wash away the stain of her actions. Marcus gestured toward the onlookers. "You all watched. Not one of you said anything. That's how these lives on, not through hate alone, but through silence." The restaurant was utterly still now. No music, no chatter. Just the weight of realization hanging in the air like smoke. He gathered his folder and looked at the trembling manager. "Call security if you must. But remember who signs your checks." Todd's phone slipped slightly in his sweaty hand. Sir, I had no idea." Marcus stepped closer. "You didn't need to. You just needed to care." Marcus turned to leave. The cameras followed him as he slowly walked toward the door. Rebecca stood frozen, her world collapsing in the silence he left behind. At the threshold, Marcus paused. His voice, calm but echoing with restrained pain, carried across the room. "You wanted to make me feel small. But the thing about dignity, it doesn't shrink for anyone." He opened the door and stepped into the evening air. The city lights reflected off the glass behind him, capturing his reflection, a man walking away not in defeat, but in power. Inside, the whispers began again, this time not of judgment, but of shame. By the next morning, the video had spread everywhere. Millions watched. Debates ignited. Rebecca's words, "I don't serve your kind," became a haunting symbol of everything wrong yet painfully familiar. And Marcus? He didn't issue statements or seek interviews. He returned to his office, poured himself a cup of coffee, and stared out at the skyline his work had built. He'd exposed something deeper than prejudice. He'd revealed the quiet cruelty of a world still pretending not to see. And somewhere, beneath the noise of outrage and apology, one question echoed louder than the rest. How many more times must this happen before silence finally breaks? The sun rose quietly over the city, casting a soft gold glow over the skyline. But inside Marcus's office, the light felt heavier, weighted by what had happened the night before. His phone buzzed relentlessly. News outlets, bloggers, reporters, all wanted a comment. "Restaurant owner humiliated by his own staff," the headline screamed. He didn't answer any calls. He didn't post online. He just sat there, staring at the faint reflection of himself in the glass wall, composed but distant. The world was talking, yet Marcus was silent. Because for him, This wasn't about trending hashtags or public pity. It was about the truth that had been there long before anyone pressed record. He thought of Rebecca's trembling face, the way Todd's authority had collapsed under truth, and the silent crowd that had watched it all happen. The shame wasn't his, it was theirs. And that was the most challenging part to live with, knowing that people had seen injustice and said nothing. Days passed. The video went viral online, garnering millions of views. Some called Marcus a hero, others called him dramatic. And still, others whispered that maybe Rebecca didn't mean it like that. Marcus read the comments, each one a mirror of society itself, split between empathy and denial. That's when he realized the problem wasn't just racism, it was a lack of comfort. People preferred the illusion of equality as long as it didn't inconvenience them. He attended a meeting with his board that week. Every face looked uneasy. Someone finally asked, "What are you going to do about the restaurant?" Marcus leaned back. "We're not firing one waitress," he said calmly. "We're changing everything." He paused, then added, "Because firing her fixes the headline, not the mindset." There was silence. A deep, uneasy silence that spoke louder than applause ever could. The restaurant reopened a month later. Same name, same walls, but a different spirit. Marcus had ordered every employee to attend a mandatory racial sensitivity and empathy program. Not the kind filled with corporate buzzwords, but the kind that forced people to face uncomfortable truths. He didn't hire PR firms or release a glossy campaign. Instead, he stood before his entire staff and told them the story himself. He described that night, not with anger, but with honesty. He spoke about what it felt like to be judged, dismissed, and humiliated in a place he had built with his own hands. Some of them cried. Some couldn't look him in the eye. And when he was done, he said only one thing. "If you can't see every person who walks through these doors as human, this is not the place for you." That was it. No grand speeches. No applause. Just truth. Over time, word spread, not of scandal, but of transformation. People returned, not because of sympathy, but because they saw something rare, accountability. Months later, Marcus was invited to speak at a youth conference about leadership. He hesitated at first, but then realized his story wasn't just about one restaurant, one night, or one waitress. It was about a system that survives through silence. On stage, his voice was calm, steady. "I didn't expose racism," he said. "I revealed how ordinary it still is." He told the young audience about that night, the humiliation, the disbelief, and the viral aftermath. But what stayed with people most wasn't the moment of revelation. It was his restraint. Because in a world that glorifies outrage, Marcus had chosen reflection. He ended his speech with a quiet challenge. "The next time you see something wrong, ask yourself, will you speak or will you watch?" The applause was long, but Marcus didn't smile. He didn't want to be celebrated. He wanted to be remembered, not as a victim, but as a mirror. That evening, Marcus walked past his restaurant again. The lights glowed softly. Inside, a new waitress smiled as she served a family, black, white, and brown, sharing laughter over dinner. He paused at the window, watching silently. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a small smile. He knew that one story couldn't change the world, but maybe it could start a conversation that would. He turned and began walking down the street, blending seamlessly into the city's rhythm. But his words lingered in the air, as if the wind itself carried them. Racism doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in service smiles, in lowered gazes, in polite avoidance, but silence feeds it more than hatred ever could. The screen fades to black. Then, his voice returns, quiet but powerful. We can't rewrite every story that's been stained by prejudice, but we can decide how the next one begins. The question is, will we?